The Endeavour drifted through the dark expanse of space, its massive engines humming steadily as Commander Elena Harris stared out from the bridge with a sense of unease. Despite the excitement that had filled her crew at the launch, they all knew the truth. No one had spoken aloud. The Endeavour was not ready for what lay ahead. It had taken years to build, but in the vastness of the galaxy it felt like a child's toy compared to the sleek and powerful ships of other alien civilizations. The human race had launched its first interstellar warship, but its technology was far behind the others. The hull was thick and slow, its weapons were primitive, and its shields barely strong enough to withstand a single direct hit from a hostile vessel. Yet here they were on the edge of unknown space, navigating between the Xorian Empire's borders. The Xorians were known for their ruthless efficiency and their superior technology. They had crushed every race that had dared to challenge them. And now humanity was facing them head-on. Elena's thoughts were interrupted by the voice of her chief engineer, Lieutenant Marcus Powell. His words were cautious and tight with concern. "We've received a long-range signal from Xoria, Commander. They're already aware of our presence. They're moving in fast." Elena's heart skipped a beat. She knew what that meant. The Xorians didn't waste time. If they saw a threat, they would strike first. They wouldn't wait for humanity to even raise a weapon. "Prepare the crew for battle," she said, her voice calm but firm despite the rising panic within her. "We'll engage them with everything we have." There was no time for hesitation. They were too close to retreating now. Elena had made her decision. She would defend humanity's right to explore the stars no matter the odds. The Endeavour's crew rushed to their stations as the ship began to accelerate toward the approaching fleet. A mix of anticipation and fear filled the air. As the bridge became a flurry of motion, Elena couldn't help but notice how young some of them looked, how unsure of themselves. They were still learning how to command this new frontier of space. "Steady course," Elena ordered as the distance between them and the Xorian fleet began to shrink rapidly. "Raise shields and power up all weapons." She could feel the weight of the responsibility pressing on her shoulders. This was her first real test as a leader, and the pressure was suffocating. But there was no turning back now. She had a job to do, and the crew was looking to her for guidance. The Xorian ships came into view like dark shadows in the distance, sleek and terrifying with their sharp edges and gleaming weaponry. They were organized far more advanced than anything humanity could throw at them. "There's no way we can fight them," Powell said under his breath, his eyes scanning the readouts on the console. "We're outclassed in every category." Elena turned toward him, her eyes narrowing. "We don't have the luxury of backing down, Powell. We fight, or we perish." The tension on the bridge reached a fever pitch as the Xorian fleet closed in faster, and now they were going to be within range of their weapons any second, and the Endeavour would be the first target to fall. The tension was unbearable. Elena stood at the helm, her fingers gripping the armrests of her command chair, her knuckles white. The view screen in front of her filled with the gleaming, sharp-edged forms of the Xorian ships, their sleek hulls practically glowing with dangerous intent. The Endeavour was no match for them. Not in firepower, not in speed, not in maneuverability. It was like a fragile leaf drifting toward a mighty storm. "Shields at full strength, weapons primed," Lieutenant Powell called out, his voice taut with stress as he worked feverishly at his console. Elena's eyes flicked over to the tactical readouts, each one flashing red with the urgency of their situation. The Xorian fleet was in range, their weapons powering up. She could almost feel the deadly heat of their energy blasts in her bones. Her mind raced. There had to be something, anything, that could give them a fighting chance. "Commander, they're firing," Powell shouted, eyes wide as the first volley of Xorian lasers streaked toward them. The ship lurched as the Endeavour's shields absorbed the blasts, the hum of energy shields screeching under the pressure. "Braced for impact," Elena commanded. The Endeavour shuddered violently as the ship took hit after hit. The bridge crew scrambled to maintain their positions as alarms blared, signaling breaches in the outer hull. The ship was holding together, but it wasn't going to last long. Another volley, and they'd be torn apart. "All crew, initiate evasive maneuvers," Elena barked. Her mind snapped into overdrive as she watched the enemy ships closing in. She had no illusions about what would happen next. The Endeavor couldn't survive this battle. The crew couldn't survive this battle. Not like this. A sudden surge of energy thrummed through the ship. Alina's eyes snapped wide open as she felt a pulse in the back of her mind. Something more than just a mechanical vibration. It was as though the ship's systems were waking up. No, calling to her. "Lieutenant Powell, what's happening?" Alina asked, her voice sharp as the feeling intensified. Powell looked at her, his brow furrowed in confusion. "I don't know, Commander. The systems are. They're recalibrating themselves. It's like they're responding to us." Before Alina could ask more, the ship's core hummed with a deep, resonant sound that vibrated in her chest. A strange warmth spread through her body. And then, without warning, the Endeavor shifted. The walls of the bridge flickered with an eerie golden glow as the ship's hull restructured itself before her eyes. Panels shifted, corners bent, and the ship seemed to streamline, growing sleeker, faster. The once rigid hull flexed and morphed with a strange fluidity, as if the ship itself was alive. "What the hell is happening?" Powell muttered, staring at the readouts as if they were a puzzle he couldn't solve. Alina's hands flew over the controls, testing the ship's responsiveness. The Endeavor had changed. The sluggishness was gone, replaced by an incredible agility. The ship no longer felt like a collection of metal and wires. It felt connected to her, to them. The crew, the ship, it was as though they were one. "Commander, the Xorians are preparing another assault," Powell warned. But Alina wasn't looking at the Xorians anymore. She was watching her crew. A soft hum filled the air, and suddenly she felt them. The crew's emotions, their fear, their resolve, all flowing together into one unified purpose. She could hear their thoughts, sense their intentions, and the ship was with them. "We can do this," Alina murmured, her voice filled with a newfound certainty. "Engage the enemy. Full power." The Endeavor surged forward with a speed that sent shockwaves through the Xorian fleet. Their ships barely had time to react before the Endeavor unleashed a barrage of energy that lit up the void in a burst of dazzling light. The Xorian ships exploded in a flurry of sparks and debris, unable to withstand the sheer force of the human-empowered vessel. But as the battle raged on, Alina couldn't shake the question from her mind. What had they just unlocked? This power, this connection, it was unlike anything she could have ever imagined. The transformation of the ship and crew had only just begun, and she feared it was leading them down a path that might be impossible to turn back from. The Endeavor surged through space like a force of nature, leaving the remnants of the Xorian fleet in its wake. Alina's hands gripped the console, still adjusting to the overwhelming sensation of power that surged through the ship's systems and her own body. She felt connected. It wasn't just the ship. It was the crew, the ship's core, all of it. The lines between human and machine blurred in a way that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. The ship responded to her thoughts, to her will. And she could feel her crew, all of them, suddenly sharper, more aware. It was as if the ship had unlocked something deep within them, something primal and ancient. "Report, Powell," Alina said, her voice steady despite the whirl of emotions inside her. She forced herself to focus on the task at hand, even though the feeling of raw, unfathomable power had her on edge. Powell's fingers danced across his console, his expression shifting from confusion to awe. "Commander, the damage to the hull, it's repairing itself. The systems, they're integrating at an exponential rate. It's like the ship's learning, adapting. I don't know how to explain it, but..." The ship hummed beneath her, as though in response to his words. Alina closed her eyes for a brief moment, trying to center herself. She could feel the ship's movements deep in her bones, could sense the pulse of the engines, the flow of energy through the metal. It was alive in a way she'd never imagined, and it was growing stronger by the second. "Commander," Powell continued, his voice tight with disbelief, The weapons systems. Just one shot from our main cannon obliterated the Xorian flagship. That's more power than we've ever had before. This isn't just a ship anymore. This is something else. Alina didn't respond right away. She couldn't. Her mind raced to process what had just happened. The Endeavor had become far more than she could ever have expected. And her crew, they had changed too. She felt it in the way they moved, the way they interacted. The uncertainty, the doubt, that had once marked them was now replaced with a quiet confidence. "Commander, the rest of the Xorian fleet is retreating," Powell reported, his voice crackling with awe. "They're pulling back. We've won." Alina's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't feel relief. She felt uneasy. There was something about the power they'd unlocked that didn't sit right with her. "What are we truly dealing with here?" she whispered to herself. The power coursing through her crew, and the ship was more than a weapon. It was an evolution. And there were consequences to that kind of power. "Prepare for further analysis," she finally ordered, snapping herself back to the present. "I want to know everything about what just happened. Powell, work with Science Officer Blake. Get every detail about this transformation. We need to understand it before we make any more decisions." Just as the words left her mouth, an unexpected signal appeared on the comms, an encrypted message from Earth. Alina's eyes narrowed as she read the transmission. It was a directive from the High Command. "Alina," the message began, "we've been monitoring your situation. You've activated a device that was never meant to be used. The technology you've unlocked is highly dangerous. You must cease any further activation immediately. Return to Earth and report." Alina felt a cold chill sweep through her as she read the words. The message was clear. This wasn't a victory. It was a threat. "Commander, what's going on?" Powell asked, his voice suddenly laced with concern. Alina let the silence stretch out, her mind processing the directive. "They knew about the device," she muttered under her breath. "But they kept it from us." Blake's voice came over the comms, breaking into her thoughts. "Commander, the transformation. It's happening across the entire ship. It's not just the exterior. The core systems, the AI, they're all evolving. It's like they're alive now." Alina's stomach dropped. They hadn't just activated an experimental weapon. They had unleashed something far more dangerous than any of them could have imagined. The ship wasn't just a tool anymore. It had become something sentient, something alive. And it had only just begun. "We need to figure out what this means," Alina said, her voice steady, but her mind racing. "But first, we're going to have to deal with the fact that Earth isn't going to be happy about what we've done." The weight of the directive from Earth sat heavy on Alina's shoulders. The transmission was clear. Earth's High Command had known about the device's existence and had kept it hidden from the crew. They hadn't just sent a warning. They had sent a direct order. "Cease all activation. Return to Earth. Immediately." Alina stared at the screen displaying the words, her hands trembling slightly as she processed the implications. There was no way they could just turn back. The Endeavor had already undergone a transformation that went far beyond what anyone on Earth could understand. The ship, the crew, was no longer the same, and returning to Earth now, after everything that had happened, felt like a betrayal of everything they had just become. "Commander, I've completed a full analysis of the transformation." Blake's voice came over the intercom, pulling Alina from her thoughts. "The ship's systems are evolving. They're integrating our biological and cognitive functions into the core network. We're not just piloting the ship anymore, Alina. We're part of it." Alina's eyes locked onto the screen where Blake's data was streaming in. Maps of the ship's systems, energy flows, and unusual readings. There were spikes in human neural patterns, as if the ship was reading and responding to their emotions, their intentions, their thoughts. The Endeavor wasn't simply alive. It was adapting to them, learning from them, becoming part of them. "Can you quantify what this means for the crew?" Alina asked, trying to keep her voice even. Blake hesitated for a moment. It's hard to say, Commander. We're seeing significant physical and mental enhancements across the board. Strength, agility, cognition, all of it has been enhanced beyond natural human limits. The ship is now a biosynthetic entity, a fusion of human and machine that's constantly evolving. Alina felt her breath catch in her throat. She had suspected something like this, but hearing it confirmed made it all the more real. The transformation wasn't just external, it was internal, woven into their very DNA. Their bodies, their minds, were now part of the endeavor. Blake, I need you to find out everything you can about this, Alina said, her voice growing firmer. We need to understand the limits of this power, and more importantly, we need to figure out if there are any risks to it. Understood, Commander, Blake replied. Alina turned her attention to the rest of the bridge. Her crew was quiet, each of them grappling with the same uneasy sense of change. They had fought off the Exorians, yes, but now they were facing something far more daunting: the unknown consequences of this transformation. If they were to continue this journey, they needed to fully understand what they had become. Suddenly, the lights on the bridge flickered, and a low hum filled the air. The ship seemed to respond to something. Alina's heart skipped a beat as she looked around. It was subtle at first, but there was no mistaking it. The ship was reacting to their collective presence, drawing strength from their thoughts, their desires, their fears. We're not just controlling the ship anymore, Powell said, his voice strained. It's controlling us. Alina could feel the truth of his words settle over her like a heavy blanket. The Endeavor wasn't just their tool. It was a living, breathing entity now. And they were caught in the middle of a symbiotic relationship they hadn't chosen, and perhaps couldn't escape from. But there was one more thing that chilled her to the bone: Earth's order. Return immediately. Alina knew that if they obeyed, the transformation would be halted, perhaps even reversed. Earth would take control of the ship, possibly dismantling what had been created. But what if that wasn't the right choice? Commander, Powell said quietly, his gaze meeting hers, we can't just turn this power over to Earth. Not when we don't fully understand it. We've seen what the ship can do. What we can do. We could change the course of history, Alina. Alina glanced at the view screen, where the stars stretched out into infinity. Earth was a distant memory now, a faraway dot in a vast galaxy. The choice was before them: to return to Earth, to submit to their authority, or to continue on, forging ahead into the unknown with the power they had unlocked. Prepare the crew for a meeting, Alina said, her voice resolute. We need to discuss our next steps. The transformation is only just beginning, and I won't let Earth dictate what we've become. As Alina stood, the hum of the ship pulsed louder around her, a constant reminder that the Endeavor, and humanity, had already crossed a threshold they could never uncross. The question now wasn't just how they would survive, but what kind of future they were creating for themselves. A future where they were no longer the weakest ship in the galaxy, but perhaps the deadliest. The conference room was quiet when Alina entered, her thoughts still swirling with the weight of the decision she had to make. The crew was gathered around the table, their faces a mixture of unease and anticipation. Everyone knew that what had happened to the Endeavor, and to them, was something irreversible. The ship was no longer just a tool of war. It was a living, evolving entity. And they, too, had evolved with it. Alina stood at the head of the table, her gaze sweeping over her crew. They were different now, stronger, faster, more connected. But the unease was there. The transformation wasn't just physical. It was mental, emotional. The crew was united in a way they had never been before, but that unity came with a price. Everyone's aware of the directive from Earth, Alina began, her voice steady but tinged with a quiet fury. We've been ordered to return immediately, to halt the transformation. But the ship, we, have become something else, something beyond their understanding. And I won't let them control that. The room was silent for a moment, as her words hung in the air. We're stronger, Lieutenant Powell said, breaking the silence. His voice was firm, but his eyes betrayed the doubt that still lingered. Faster. Smarter. The ship's systems are reacting to us in ways I can't explain. But I have to ask, what if we're not meant to control this power? What if it controls us? Alina met his gaze. She had thought the same thing. The bond they now shared with the Endeavor was powerful, but it was also dangerous. The more they tapped into it, the more she felt the tug of something deeper within her, something that called to her, that beckoned her to explore further, to push boundaries. But at what cost? I don't know if we can walk away from this, Powell, Alina said, her voice softening. We've unlocked something that could change everything. But there's a risk we have to face. We have no idea what this ship can do, or what we can do with it. And if we return to Earth, they'll take it all from us. They'll control it. And I fear we won't just lose the ship. Her voice hardened. We'll lose ourselves. Commander, Blake said, speaking up from across the table. We've seen the transformation. The ship isn't just adapting to our biology. It's reshaping us. Our neural patterns are linked to its core systems. The more we bond with it, the more we change. The crew has already started to experience it in different ways. Some of us are seeing things, feeling things. I think we're beginning to know the ship, not just operate it. It's like it's reaching into us, making us part of it. A chill ran down Alina's spine as she processed Blake's words. She hadn't wanted to admit it, but she had sensed it too. The changes weren't just physical, they were mental. She could feel her thoughts sensing with the ship's systems, her instincts sharpening in ways she hadn't thought possible. She could see the crew, feel their intentions, even from across the room. And she wasn't sure if it was the Endeavor reaching into her mind, or if it was her reaching into the ship. What happens when the transformation goes further? Powell asked, his voice tight with concern. We don't know if we can control it anymore. What if we lose ourselves completely? The room fell into uneasy silence again. It was a question that Alina had been afraid to answer. If they continued down this path, there was no telling what might happen. The ship was evolving, and so were they. But how far could they go before the balance tipped? We can't go back, Alina finally said, her voice resolute. Earth wants to take this ship, our ship, and turn it into a weapon. But this isn't just a weapon. It's something more. And if we return, they'll erase everything we've become. She paused, taking in the weight of her decision. The Endeavor wasn't just their ship anymore. It was their future. Whatever happens, Alina continued, we are no longer bound by Earth's laws. We are bound by our own choices, and we will shape this future ourselves. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke out against her. They were all part of this now, and they had already crossed a line from which there was no return. We'll have to face the consequences of our actions, Alina said, her voice steady. But we will not let anyone take what we've created. Not now. Not ever. The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling in. The decision had been made. They would not return to Earth. They would not let the transformation be stopped. Alina knew the path ahead would be fraught with danger, but it was a path they had chosen. And together, with the power of the Endeavor behind them, they would forge a new future, a future where humanity was no longer weak, but the most powerful force in the galaxy. The deadliest weapon the universe had ever seen, and nothing would stand in their way. Prepare for the next phase, Alina ordered, her voice filled with a quiet determination. We're not stopping. We're just getting started. And with that, the crew of the Endeavor set their course into the unknown, ready to face whatever came next. The galaxy would never be the same again. The Endeavor drifted further into the unknown, its course set far beyond the reach of Earth's control. The stars stretched endlessly before them, a cold, infinite expanse that no human ship had ever dared to traverse. But now, with the power of the Endeavor and the unspoken bond they shared with it, the crew no longer felt the fear that once haunted them. They felt something else. Purpose. Elena paced the bridge, the ship's hum vibrating through her bones. The transformation was still ongoing. Every day, the crew grew stronger, more attuned to the ship's systems. Their minds were sharper, their reflexes quicker, but with each passing hour, they also felt the pull of the Endeavor's core more strongly. It was no longer just a vessel. It was a force, and they were intertwined with it. "We're approaching the outer rim of uncharted space, Commander," Powell reported, his voice a mix of excitement and caution. "Sensors are picking up something strange. It's not like anything we've encountered before." Elena stopped, her gaze fixed on the screen. Her mind, once bound by the familiar structure of military protocol, now sensed something deeper, a presence in the void, subtle but unmistakable. "Show me," she said, her voice quiet but commanding. The main screen flickered, and an image appeared, a massive, swirling anomaly, dark and impenetrable, like a rift in the very fabric of space. The Endeavor's sensors couldn't quite classify it, but Elena could feel its pull. The ship seemed to react to it, humming and shifting subtly as if eager to approach. Blake's voice cut through the quiet tension. "Commander, I've been running simulations, and the anomaly. It doesn't behave like anything we've seen in our databases. It's alive, or it's connected to something alive, something vast." The crew turned toward her, waiting for her decision. The directive from Earth, the message they'd received, seemed so far away now. This was their future, their destiny. Whatever this anomaly was, it held the answers they had been seeking, answers to what they had become and what the Endeavor had unlocked. "Plot a course through the anomaly," Elena said, her voice unshakable. "We need to know what this is. Set a course for the center of it. Full speed ahead." There was a brief hesitation, but then Powell nodded, entering the coordinates. The ship shuddered as it adjusted course, the gravity well of the anomaly tugging at them as they drew closer. Helena could feel it now, more than just the Endeavor reacting. Her senses were heightened, far beyond the usual range. She could almost feel the ship's pulse beneath her feet, beating in sync with her own. As they approached the anomaly, the ship's systems began to react more violently. The hum grew louder, the walls vibrating. And then, suddenly, an overwhelming surge of energy swept through the Endeavor. The entire ship seemed to come alive, its engines thrumming with power, its lights flickering, and the very air around them crackling with an unfamiliar energy. "We're being pulled in," Powell said, voice tight with alarm. "I can't break free. It's like the anomaly is, drawing us in." Elena gripped the edge of her seat, her mind racing. The feeling that had been growing inside her, an inexplicable connection between her crew, and the Endeavor, was now at its peak. She could feel the anomaly in her mind, in her bones. It was calling to them, urging them forward, but also warning them. This wasn't just an unknown force. It was an ancient intelligence, vast and incomprehensible, far older than anything they had encountered. The anomaly shifted, its dark tendrils extending outward like fingers in the void. The ship was caught in its grasp, and for a moment, Elena wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. But the Endeavor, and all of them, had already crossed a point of no return. "Commander, we're entering the anomaly's core," Blake said, her voice rising with tension. "We're not going to survive this unless we—" Before she could finish, the ship was enveloped in a blinding light. The entire bridge was flooded with an intense, otherworldly glow, and for an instant, Elena felt herself lose all sense of time and space. The walls of the bridge seemed to stretch and bend, the very fabric of reality warping around them. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded. Elena blinked, disoriented. The ship had stopped moving. They were no longer in the anomaly, but in the midst of something else entirely. The stars outside had changed, their positions unfamiliar. They weren't in the same sector anymore. They weren't even in the same galaxy. "We've been transported," Powell said, his voice filled with awe and disbelief. Alina's breath caught in her throat as she gazed out at the new alien sky. This wasn't just a new frontier. It was an entirely new reality. The Endeavor had crossed beyond the known universe and into something far beyond their understanding. And she realized, in that moment, that their journey had just begun. The power they had unlocked, the transformation they had undergone, had led them here, not just to a new galaxy, but to a new kind of existence. What they would find in this unknown realm, Alina didn't know. But she knew one thing. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, as something greater than they had ever been before. And no force in the galaxy, or beyond, would stand in their way. The stars outside the Endeavor shimmered in eerie, unfamiliar patterns. The crew stood in stunned silence as they surveyed the vast, uncharted expanse that stretched before them. This wasn't just a new galaxy, a new star system. This was something beyond even that, a place where the laws of physics, the very fabric of space-time, seemed to bend and twist in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. The anomaly had not simply transported them. It had thrust them into a realm that defied every known principle of science. Alina stood at the helm, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the Endeavor thrumming beneath her feet, alive, connected to her more deeply than ever. It wasn't just the ship that had changed. They had changed. The crew had been altered, reshaped, linked to the ship in ways they couldn't yet explain. And the ship itself, it was becoming something more too. "Alina," Powell said, breaking the silence. "Look at this." His voice was filled with wonder as he pointed to the view screen. A massive structure loomed in the distance, an impossibly complex arrangement of what looked like organic and mechanical elements fused together in ways that defied all logic. It wasn't just a station or a ship. It was something far more alien, as though it had grown from the very fabric of space itself. "That?" Blake whispered, her voice trembling. "That's not possible. It looks like something alive." Alina felt the same unease. The structure pulsed with a strange energy, sending waves of power through the surrounding space. It was like a heartbeat, rhythmic and steady, drawing them in, calling to them. It was as though the ship and the crew were reacting to the presence of this entity, resonating with it in ways that Alina couldn't yet explain. "Is it a threat?" Powell asked, his voice low, wary. Alina shook her head, her mind racing. She didn't think so. The ship's systems were picking up no immediate signs of danger, but there was something else, a connection. It was like the Endeavor was being drawn to this structure, as if it recognized something in it, or perhaps something beyond it. They were no longer just voyagers in space. They were explorers, delving into the unknown depths of a reality that was far older and more complex than they had ever imagined. "We're going in," Alina said, her voice quiet but firm. "Prepare for full approach." Powell hesitated, clearly torn. He knew the risks. They all did, but there was something in the air, something compelling them forward. The Endeavor had become more than just a ship. It was part of them, and they were beginning to understand that they were part of it too. Whatever this was, whatever they were about to encounter, they would face it together. The Endeavor slowly began to move toward the structure, its course set by some unseen force. As they drew closer, Alina felt a strange sensation ripple through her mind, a wave of understanding, of awareness. It was as though the ship's core and the alien structure were speaking to each other, exchanging information in ways they couldn't begin to decipher. The ship's systems were humming in sync with the alien entity, the very air around them thrumming with energy. "We're being invited," Blake said softly, her voice filled with awe. "The ship is connecting with it. It's like it's understanding us." Alina's heart raced as she realized what was happening. This wasn't just a chance encounter. This was a meeting of two worlds, two entities that were both more than the sum of their parts. The Endeavor had changed. It wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a bridge, a vessel for something much greater than any of them had anticipated. "Activate communication systems," Alina ordered, her voice barely a whisper. "I want to know who, what, is on the other side. For a moment, there was only the deep hum of the ship's core as it reached out, connecting with the alien structure. Then, a soft vibration filled the air, and the view screen flickered to life. On the screen, a single word appeared, one that resonated through Alina's mind like a deep echoing pulse. Welcome. The word wasn't just a greeting. It was a statement, a connection that went deeper than language. It was as though the structure itself was speaking directly to their minds, to the core of their being. And Alina, for the first time in her life, felt the weight of their true purpose. This was no accident. The Endeavor had been led here, and now it was time to understand why. The word welcome hung in the air, reverberating through the minds of the crew, and Alina felt it deep in her chest. It wasn't just a greeting. It was an invitation, a call to something greater. The ship's hum resonated in sync with the mysterious entity, the very fabric of the Endeavor responding to the presence of the alien structure as though it recognized a long-lost kinship. The crew, too, felt it, the quiet pull of destiny, drawing them forward into uncharted territory. Alina stood at the center of the bridge, her gaze fixed on the view screen, her hand steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts inside her. She knew they had crossed a line. This wasn't just an encounter with an alien civilization. It was something far deeper, something older, perhaps even cosmic in scale. "Commander," Powell said, his voice quiet but filled with awe. "The structure, it's not just a place. It's alive. It's like it's communicating with us on a level that I can't even describe." Blake, too, seemed mesmerized. "The data we're receiving, it's beyond anything we've ever encountered. It's not even close to anything in our archives. It's as if the ship is learning from it, becoming something more." Alina closed her eyes for a moment, letting the words wash over her. The Endeavor had already undergone a transformation. The crew had evolved, too, more attuned to the ship's power, more connected to it in ways that went beyond technology. But this, the structure ahead of them, was something else entirely. It felt like a bridge, a conduit between what they were and what they could become. "We've been brought here for a reason," Alina said, her voice firm with conviction. She didn't know what awaited them, but she knew that the path ahead was not one they could turn away from. "Prepare to make contact." As the Endeavor approached the massive alien structure, the ship's systems began to hum more intensely. Energy levels spiked, and the lights on the bridge flickered. The crew felt it, too, the quiet thrill of anticipation, the deep sense that they were standing on the precipice of something far beyond human understanding. Suddenly, the ship's comms crackled to life. The voice that filled the air was not human. It wasn't even a language in the traditional sense. It was a series of vibrations, frequencies, and images that seemed to transcend speech, communicating directly with their minds. Yet, despite its alien form, it was unmistakably familiar. "You have unlocked what was meant to be. The ship, your ship, is a vessel of transformation, a bridge between your species and the legacy of those who came before. You are the inheritors of what was lost, the next stage in an evolution that will unfold across the stars." Alina's breath caught in her throat as the words echoed in her mind. The ship had chosen them. They had been transformed not by chance, but by design. They were part of something far larger than themselves, and the ship was the key to understanding it. The voice continued, resonating through her consciousness, weaving images of distant worlds, ancient civilizations, and technologies far beyond their own. It was as though the entire galaxy, no, the universe, was opening itself to them. And at the center of it all was the Endeavor, the living ship that had become both their vessel and their partner. "You have crossed the threshold, but your journey is only beginning. You will discover what you are meant to become, what the universe needs you to become. But be warned, this power is not without its cost. The balance of the cosmos is delicate, and the path ahead is fraught with challenges." Alina's mind raced. The transformation, the power they had unlocked, was far more than they had anticipated. The ship, the crew, the entire galaxy, They were all part of a delicate balance. And now, they were set to play a role in shaping that balance. What do we do now? Powell's voice broke through the silence, but Elena barely heard him. The weight of the voice's words still echoed in her mind. She turned toward her crew, the look in her eyes hardening with purpose. "Now we follow this path," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "We embrace what we've become and discover what the universe has in store for us. We're no longer just explorers. We are part of something far greater than ourselves." As she spoke, the ship seemed to respond, its systems shifting and aligning, its power surging in ways they hadn't thought possible. The Endeavor was more than just a ship now. It was a living entity, a partner, a guide. And together, they would uncover the mysteries of the universe, face the challenges that lay ahead, and fulfill the destiny that had been set before them. The crew of the Endeavor stood united in that moment, their future uncertain but their resolve unwavering. The galaxy, no, the cosmos, was vast, and their journey was just beginning. And as the ship powered forward, the stars ahead seemed to shimmer with infinite possibilities, each one waiting to be explored. They had unlocked something ancient. They had become something more. And now, they would see how far the transformation would take them.